everybody. So wanted to follow up with you. It's been about a month since the last video that I sent out, and I think by now everybody has had time to watch it.
I've watched it 3 or 4 times already.
Have you really? Yeah, I didn't think so.
Well, I had to edit it, so...
Anyway, if you haven't watched it, you might want to go back and watch that before watching this one, because this is a follow-up to that one. But in that one, I had mentioned that we were going to do a video just answering some questions that people had for us when they heard about all of this. So we're going to answer some of those tonight. And if you have any other ones that you think of that don't get answered in this, feel free to message us and let us know.
So the first question is, why are you taking an unpaid leave of absence instead of a sabbatical?
So that is very confusing. It was confusing for us and for a lot of people. And we don't care what you call it. Some people are saying, Missy's on sabbatical. But the reason that we chose the route of an unpaid leave of absence rather than a paid sabbatical is because sabbatical takes a lot of preparation. Usually you have like a sabbatical coach. You have a lot of guidance in it. You are the whole time during your sabbatical. While you're resting and refreshing, you're also really spending a lot of intentional time seeking the Lord about what He has next for you. So while I'm doing that, I am spending time seeking the Lord. I don't have the time to give to a full sabbatical, nor did we have enough time to put that in place before I needed to start this, because I was in such a state. And honestly, our ministry is so new, our board doesn't even have a procedure in place for sabbaticals yet, so we don't know if sabbaticals are even going to be a thing for our ministry or how that all is going to work. So we went the unpaid leave of absence route for that one, for this one. One of the other questions that came in is, how are things getting done now that Missy's not in the ministry? Dylan?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that was actually one of the things that made Missy hesitant about taking a leave of absence, because she was like, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And one of the things that we realized was that because of Missy kind of being overwhelmed with everything between school and ministry stuff and work and things at home, it was kind of hard for her to keep up with those things, first of all. And secondly, we had to realize that even though we've been doing ministry for over 10 years now, and we were primarily focused in Guatemala, the truth is that we've switched from being in a sending organization that had a bunch of staff and this whole structure built to help support us in various ways. We essentially kind of shifted out of that, and now we are an even smaller nonprofit, just starting out, just a year old. And so we had to realize that there are some things that maybe we did do in the past that aren't as much of a priority right now. Now, we've always wanted to do even more things, and there's a growing list of like, hey, this would be cool, or let's do that, let's do this. But the truth is, there are some things that absolutely have to be done. There's some things that aren't absolutely necessary in order to keep the ministry running, in order to keep supporters informed, in order to fundraise and that kind of stuff. And so we had to prioritize those things and say, hey, like, there are some non-essential things that we're doing, but then there are also some things that are absolutely essential that we need to keep on doing, like making sure we continue to send out our prayer emails to our prayer team and having our monthly prayer meetings, making sure family updates are getting out. Now that we're applying for grants as well, and trying to grow a number of supporters and stuff like that. So those things are what we've put into priority. And there's some other things that, yeah, they're nice to do, and we really think that it's part of what God wants us to do to connect others in ministry. But the truth is, we just can't do it right now. However, we are also working on growing our volunteer base. And so there's a lot of people have said, hey, any way that we can help, let us know. And so we're like, all right, well, let's mobilize these volunteers, these people that want to give their time and that want to help out in various ways to grow the ministry.
So thanks, volunteers.
Yes, thanks. Another question is, you guys have already been in hard times financially, so how will this impact you financially and just being able to survive?
Yeah, so that was another question that I had before I could even really consider this. And thankfully, because of Dylan's ability to work with one of our friends at the business that he owns for several hours each week, and the money that that's bringing in for the ministry, we have been able to receive back some of the money that we were giving into the ministry to help the ministry continue. So we have things like that are reimbursable expenses that we weren't getting reimbursed to us for months and months. So we have that coming in now, which is very helpful.
Yes.
Thanks to what Dylan's doing. And so thanks, Dylan. And thanks to all the year-end donations that came in and put the ministry in a much better spot than it was a few months ago. So thank you again to all of you who gave to that. The other blessing that God gave us is when we presented this to our board, they voted to give Dylan a raise. Since there was now money there to do that. They wanted to give us a raise over a year ago, and there just wasn't money for that. So they decided that now that there was money there in the salary category, they voted to give Dylan a raise. So I'm just loafing around, and I'm just a kept woman now. No.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, we're very thankful that the board voted that way, and that has been those are the two ways that we are able to make this work. And we knew when we came to the decision that God was going to provide for it. We just didn't know how, and so it's cool to see how all of that has come together. Yeah. So one of the other questions is Dylan having some of the same struggles that Missy's having?
No, not at all. I'm a Marine. I don't struggle emotionally or with being overwhelmed or...
Yeah, you should try being married to him and dealing with those emotions that he doesn't have.
Yes. I have been working through some of the same struggles that Missy is currently working through. In fact, that was one of the first questions that the board asked when we talked to them about Missy taking a leave of absence, and they were like, well, how do we make sure that you don't go through the same thing that she is? And, since we did our debriefing in August, which we're so grateful for, I've had more time and space to actually process grieving leaving Guatemala, a change in role, living here instead of there, and being connected to the people that we've grown to love so much. But one of the things that has really helped me is I'm not going to school.
Slacker.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when Missy felt that God was leading her to, go back to school and work on her counseling degree, one of the first things that we put in place is because I'd been kind of entertaining like, hey, I need to grow in my education too, and maybe get a master's in something like missions or ministry or leadership or something like that. We decided by all means, like, we both can't be going to school at the same time because it's a whole extra load, and it's not just a bachelor's degree, it's a master's degree, which is it's a lot more intensive. For those of you who have gotten your master's degree, you know exactly what we're talking about.
And for those of you who haven't, don't do it.
But because I'm not going to school, I have had more space and time to process and to grieve. and also because my personality and my temperance is different. I process things differently. I'm not as empathic or emotional as Missy is, and that doesn't mean that I'm better than her or vice versa. And we're just different. And so we process things differently, and we need different space and time to process those things. So that's helped me to grieve a little bit quicker. Majority of you probably don't know, but at the end of 2021, I kind of went through an identity crisis, and I was like, well, if I'm not serving in Guatemala as the director of operations there, then who am I? And it took me kind of going through that for me to be in a position where I could actually hear God say, "You're my son. You're not a director. You're not a CEO. You're not a president. You're not anything more than you are my son. And I've called you to this. And if you just listen to my voice and follow me, everything's going to be okay." And so that kind of shook me out. And so over the past, year of processing things, I've been able to get to a place where I'm coming out of the fog and I'm realizing, hey, this is what God's called me to. This is my new role. This is my new purpose in the ministry. And it's really been a blessing. And that's also, I think it's helped me be able to understand more of where Missy is so that I could try and support her as she goes through that process as well. So, on that point, some of you might be thinking that, since the last video that Missy shared, maybe you're struggling with something similar where you're overwhelmed or you've got too much going on and you don't know, like it's all good stuff and you don't know, I gotta get rid of something or I gotta drop something. And so maybe Missy, if you could shed some light on what you've been going through right now of maybe some tips to see, what might help somebody else.
Yeah. So, this wasn't just something that I decided one day. It's God's been working on me and us about it for pretty much the better part of last year. And the biggest thing that I can recommend, and I'm not just saying this because I'm going to school to be a counselor and because I'm a counselor, is get yourself a good counselor. I've been through a couple. Just because of financial issues, I've had to switch and some different things like that. But find one that's a good fit and one that you can be really honest with and that you can allow to speak into your life. Also be aware of what your friends are saying to you, your friends and your husband or wife. But the people who, for me, it was like the people who were closest to me were seeing things in me that I didn't even see. So that'd be my first thing. Like, listen to what people are saying to you. Get yourself connected with a good counselor because that is huge. The other things that I'm doing is I had to do a lot of work on remembering what my identity is, and that my identity is not a missionary in Guatemala or a missionary working from the U.S. with a ministry in Guatemala. But my ministry, like Dylan was saying, I'm God's daughter. And so I have a spiritual director who I meet with regularly, who's helped with some of that. And again, just solid Christian people who can speak that we're speaking that into my life, and can speak it into yours and help you see that if this is something, like if a time away from something, whatever it is, to create more space for what's needed in your life is what God's leading you to. Just having people around you who can really support you in that and help you be courageous, encourage you, which means to pour courage into. So help give you the courage to actually take those steps, because I was real scared to take these steps. And now it's been a month and I can already see how much it's helping me. People are saying to me, like several people have said to me, it's so nice to see you smile again. And you look and you look so different and you just look like you're not carrying the weight of the world. Mm-hmm. And while I'm definitely still having emotional struggles, I do feel lighter. Um, the other thing I'm doing is, I mentioned working through the missionary debriefings, and there's also a grief processing program through YouVersion. It's called Good Grief. It's got some really good biblical insight and questions, probing questions. And then I have people keeping me accountable for that. And I also started attending a grief support group at our church. Those are some of the things that I'm doing. Also, honestly, just being, as hard as it was to get on camera and say, like, I'm struggling with depression and high levels of stress that could lead to PTSD. Like, I felt so ridiculous leading up to that. But once I shared it, it was like the whatever feelings I was having about it lost its power over me. And then not only that, but people were so encouraging, and just having people reach out and be like, hey, like, I get it. I struggle with the same thing, or we're here for you if you need anything, or we're praying for you and all that. So I would say don't be afraid to hide it. Like, that's one of the things about shame is when we keep our things hidden, they can't be in the light, and in the light is where we get our healing. So let's see. So speaking of just the way people have encouraged us and help us, one of the other questions is, how can we help support you guys through this?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say, and this is a little bit protective, but it's also necessary, is that so Missy taking a leave of absence with me and the board and even the team in Guatemala, we're being very intentional about keeping the ministry away from Missy. And part of that is because if she's taking a leave of absence, then her feeling questions about the ministry, one, because she's not involved in the day-to-day operations, she doesn't have the answers to the questions. But two, one of the things that she's related to me is that sometimes when those things come up, because there is grief and mourning and lamenting going on, it's kind of like picking out a wound that she's trying to get healing for. It's like if you got a wound that's trying to heal and there's ointment and bandages and stuff, like, you don't rip it off and then get a stick and just dig in there a couple seconds and then be like, oh yeah, that's right, this hurts, and then cover it back up again. Like, you gotta let it heal. And so in the ministry, we're trying to protect Missy from that pain, that unnecessary pain. And so the best way, the first way you can help support us is just don't ask Missy about ministry related stuff. Send it all to me. Ask somebody on the board if you know who's on the board. Because all that's going to happen is she's going to say, I don't know, talk to Dylan anyway. So cut out the middle woman and just send it right to me.
I probably won't do that. I'll probably be like, I'll send that to Dylan for you. I'm not going to be,
She's not going to be like me about it.
I'm going to be nice.
But really, and that's on purpose. And so if you could try and keep that in mind. And I know it comes up, a lot of you are just so involved in our lives and the ministry, and we're so grateful for that. And so I know you'll slip up, it happens, but I've even done a couple times. I'm like, I really want to talk to you about something exciting in the ministry. Am I allowed to do that? But yeah, just try and keep that in mind. And the other thing is help us to spread the word. Part of us trying to grow our impact in the world, trying to grow our influence, and we want to spread the word about the ministry. And so help us share with others. Back around Thanksgiving, I know, Giving Tuesday and all that is a huge thing from nonprofits, and you guys are all very involved in giving, and so you probably received hundreds of emails from all over the place. But we sent out specifically something that wasn't us asking for money or donations like most places do, is that we asked for help of sharing the word and telling others about the ministry that haven't heard about it, whether it's friends, family, your church, whatever. And actually we got really low response on that. And so that's the thing that we're focusing on the most right now, is to grow our impact and to grow people's knowledge of what it is that we're doing in Guatemala and why is it so important and why is it effective and all that kind of stuff. So I've attached a link in the email that you got this video from. And that is actually the sign up sheet for people to sign up to get more information about the ministry, that the advertising campaign that we're doing. So the best way you can support us is to spread the word, because the more that we're able to get our reach out there, the more sponsors we're able to get, which means the ministries be able to get more funding, which means we don't have to work second jobs to support the ministry, to support living, and we're able to focus more on growing and impacting the ministry and making it stronger and bigger. So that is the best way you can support us. The third way is that I am currently working on a volunteer platform where we're going to be publishing various volunteer opportunities. And so there's also a link for that in the email that you got. It's our volunteer page where you can sign up to volunteer and to help out. And if you have, some free time and some special abilities that you want to help with some of the things that Missy was doing but isn't doing right now, or things that we've always had on the list that we needed to do or wanted to do but haven't been able to because of manpower, then we'd really encourage you to sign up for that. So thank you in advance for doing those things.
Yeah, and I'll just say I'm pretty sure that I'll always be working a second job because I didn't do all these years in this counseling degree to not use it. So
Yeah.
I think you're more talking about yourself in that, and just being able to not have your focus so split
Yes.
as it is now.
And so the last question that we have to answer tonight we're recording this at night. I don't know when you're watching this, so this morning at 2 a.m., whatever, is a few people have asked us, well, why would you cut out the ministry and not something else? And I think that's a huge question, and not one that was easy for us to answer. And so I know that we prayed a lot about it, but I'll let Missy go ahead and answer that.
Yeah. So some of it Dylan has already said, but the first and most important reason is, as we were praying about it, that's what God showed us was the thing that could and needed to go out of my life right now. And he used several trained professionals to bring that about in our lives. And even though the final one was very harsh, it was impactful. And like I said in my last video, it was what was needed. And as Dylan touched on, the other reason is because my main, as I've been seeking God on what to do, I've realized that my main source of grief and stress over the last 2 years has been the ministry, has been my new role in the ministry, and how I am or am not adapting to that and all of that. When I was in Guatemala, I was with the families day in and day out, and I loved that part of my job, and I had administrative stuff to do and fundraising stuff to do and all of that. But I didn't enjoy doing it, but I did it because it was part of the job, and I loved what I did, being with the families. Well, ever since we've been back here, it's like that whole part of my job that I loved has been taken away, and all this other stuff that I don't really like doing, and some of it I despise doing, it's increased in the amount of it that I have to do. And so it's just been really hard for me. And also, as Dylan was saying, there's a wound for me there around leaving Guatemala. It's there for both of us. But it's affecting me in a deeper way because I had deeper relationships with the people that we worked with and served and did ministry with there. And so I got to the point where every interaction with someone in Guatemala or something about the ministry was painful to me. It literally felt like, having a physical wound and someone just keeps rubbing at that wound and just won't leave it go. And so that's another thing that led us to that. And our counselor said to me, she said, if you had a physical wound, wouldn't you go to the doctor and follow whatever instructions they want you to do to take care of it so that you can get well? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, so why won't you do the same with the emotional wound that you have? And so that really gave me a lot to think about and pray about. And, the thing that I realized is the emotional wound was getting so bad that it was spreading into a mental, and it was impacting me mentally and physically and in my marriage. And so I just knew that was the thing that needed to go. And it was hard, and I didn't want to do it, and I fought it. Even, like a week after my leave officially started, I was like, oh, I'm feeling better. I'm pretty sure I don't need this leave. Like, uh, I can come back. And then, like, I was talking with someone and just had the realization of, like, I'm pretty sure, like, an addict feels good after a week of not drinking or doing drugs or whatever. And, they feel like they can go into a bar or go hang out with their old friends again. And it just made me think, like, yeah, like, I'm feeling good now because I've had time away. So how much better will I feel at the end of this time that God has set aside for this? So that's why we chose the ministry, and that's how I have stood firm in that decision, even when it's been challenging.
So we really thank you guys for sticking out this long. We won't belabor this video anymore, but we know it's been over 26 minutes. So we just thank you guys so much for your support and your love, your prayers. Please continue to pray for us through this process, because more than anything, our ministry is based on Matthew 6:33, which says, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added to you." And so we want to maintain that focus. We want to make sure that we don't sacrifice our family on the altar of ministry, which is what we were advised in mission school so many years ago. And this is just a short readjustment to make sure that we have our priorities in order and that we can fully hear from God for direction for the future of the ministry. So we thank you guys. We love you. We appreciate you so much. And we look forward to seeing how God uses all this.
Bye, guys. Have a good one.